The United States and France, with the support of several other countries, have proposed a temporary ceasefire allowing for the restart of negotiations. Israel refused that proposal and stepped up its strikes, including bombing the Hezbollah headquarters where its leader was killed. And Hezbollah has continued rocket and missile attacks on Israel. And yesterday, the Israel Defense Forces conducted what it stated were limited incursions into southern Lebanon. UNIFIL peacekeepers remain in position, and the UN flag continues to fly despite Israel's request to relocate. I reiterate our deep appreciation to the military and civilian members of our UN peacekeeping force, UNIFIL, and to troop contributing countries. The safety and security of all UN personnel must be ensured. Madam President, civilians are paying a terrible price, which I utterly condemn. Since last October, more than 1,700 people have been killed in Lebanon, including over 100 children and 194 women. Over 346,000 people are confirmed to have been displaced from their homes, and government estimates put this number as high as 1 million. Another 128,000 people, both Syrian and Lebanese, have crossed into Syria. The UN has mobilized all its capacities to provide urgent humanitarian aid in Lebanon, and I ask the international community to fully fund our appeal. Since October 8th, Hezbollah attacks on Israel have killed 49 people, with over 60,000 people displaced from their homes. It is absolutely essential to avoid an all-out war in Lebanon, which would have profound and devastating consequences. Madam President, yesterday, Iran launched approximately 200 ballistic missiles towards Israel. It stated it was in response to the killings of Hassan Nasrallah and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard's Corps Commander Abbas Nilforushan last week, as well as that of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran in July. Millions of people across Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory were forced to seek shelter. One person was killed from the Iranian strikes, a Palestinian in the occupied West Bank. As I did in relation to the Iranian attack in April, and as should have been obvious yesterday in the context of the condemnation I expressed, I again strongly condemn yesterday's massive missile attack by Iran on Israel. And these attacks, paradoxically, do nothing to support the cause of the Palestinian people or reduce their suffering. Almost 1 year has passed since the atrocious 7 October acts of terror by Hamas and the taking of hostages. And since last October, Israel has conducted in Gaza the most deadly and destructive military campaign in my years as Secretary General. The suffering endured by the Palestinian people in Gaza is beyond imagination. At the same time, the situation in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, continues to deteriorate with Israeli military operations, construction of settlements, evictions, land grabs, and intensification of settler attacks, progressively undermining any possibility of a two-state solution. And simultaneously, armed Palestinian groups have also used violence. Hamas has continued to launch rockets, and just yesterday, 7 Israelis were killed in a terror attack in Jaffa. Madam President, the events of the past week, the past months, and indeed nearly the past year make it clear. It's high time for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, with the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, the effective delivery of humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza, and irreversible progress to a two-state solution. It's high time for a cessation of hostilities in Lebanon, real action towards full implementation of Security Council resolutions 1559 and 1701, paving the way for diplomatic efforts for sustainable peace. It's high time to stop the sickening cycle of escalation after escalation that is leading the people of the Middle East straight over the cliff. Each escalation has served as a pretext for the next. We must never lose sight of the tremendous toll that this growing conflict is taking on civilians. And we cannot look away from systematic violations of international humanitarian law. This deadly cycle of tit-for-tat violence must stop. Time is running out, and I thank you.
Je remercie le secrétaire général de son exposé et je donne maintenant la parole aux membres du Conseil qui souhaitent faire une déclaration. Je donne maintenant la parole au représentant de la France.
Madame la Présidente,
Madam President,
je remercie le
I
secrétaire
would
général
like
des
to
Nations
thank the
Unies
Secretary General
pour
of the
son
United
intervention
Nations for his statement,
et je tiens à lui redire
and I would
le
like
plein
to state
soutien
once
et
again
toute la
that he has
confiance
the
de
full
la
support
France.
and trust of France.
La France condamne les attaques par
France
missiles
condemns
balistiques
the
perpétrées hier
ballistic
par
missile
l'Iran
attacks
contre
perpetrated
Israël.
yesterday by
Attachée à
Iran
la
against
sécurité
Israel.
d'Israël,
We are attached to
la
the
France a
security of
mobilisé
Israel,
ses
and
moyens
France has
militaires
mobilized
au
its military
Moyen-Orient
means in the
pour
Middle
parer
East
la menace
in order to fend
iranienne.
off the Iranian
Nous
threat.
appelons l'Iran
We
à
call upon Iran
s'abstenir
to
de toute
abstain
action
from any
susceptible
action
de conduire
that could
à une
lead to
déstabilisation
additional
supplémentaire et
destabilization
à un embrasement
and
régional.
a regional
Nous
conflagration.
condamnons aussi
We
l'attaque
also
terroriste
condemn
qui a
the
visé les
terrorist
civils à Jaffa.
attack that targeted
La
civilians
France
in Jaffa.
rappelle la
France
nécessité
would recall
de
the
mettre
need
fin
to put an
à
end
l'escalade militaire
to
dans la
military
région
escalation
qui
in
ne
the
fait
region,
qu'aggraver
which is only
l'instabilité
worsening
et accroître
instability and
l'insécurité
increasing
et dont les
insecurity.
populations civiles
And
sont
the
les
civilian
premières victimes.
populations are the first victims of this.
Au Liban, la situation
In
est
Lebanon,
grave.
the situation is
Les
serious.
opérations militaires
Military
s'intensifient.
operations are intensifying.
L'armée israélienne a
The
mené des
Israeli army
incursions
carried out
terrestres sur le territoire
land
libanais
incursions on
en
Lebanese
violation
territory
de la
in
souveraineté
violation
libanaise
of Lebanese sovereignty,
et le Hezbollah poursuit
and
ses
Hezbollah
attaques contre
is
Israël.
pursuing its attacks against Israel.
Comme l'a rappelé le ministre de l'Europe et
As
des Affaires
recalled by the
étrangères,
Minister for
Jean-Noël
Europe
Barrot, lors
and
de sa
Foreign Affairs
visite à
of France,
Beyrouth le 30
Jean-Noël
septembre,
Barrot, on his
la
visit to
France est
Beirut on the
opposée
30th of
à
September.
toute opération
France opposes
terrestre
any
israélienne au
Israeli
Liban
land operation
et
in
elle appelle
Lebanon,
à la
and
cessation
we
des
call
attaques
for a cessation
indiscriminées
of
contre les
indiscriminate
civils.
attacks against civilians.
La France condamne les frappes
France
aériennes israéliennes
condemns the
qui
Israeli
ont
air
provoqué
attacks
un nombre
that have led
considérable de
to
victimes
a
civiles,
considerable number of
ainsi
civilian
que les attaques
victims,
du
as
Hezbollah
well as
contre
the attacks
Israël
of
et sa
Hezbollah
population.
against Israel and its
Il
population.
faut un cessez-le-feu
We
au
need
plus vite
a
au
ceasefire
Liban.
as soon as possible
La
in
France
Lebanon.
appelle les parties à se
France urges
saisir
the
sans
parties
délai
to, without
de
delay,
l'appel
answer
et
the
des
call
propositions
to
du
consider the
président de la
proposals
République
of the
française
President of the
et
French
du
Republic
président des
and the
États-Unis
President of the United
avec le soutien
States,
de nos
with the
partenaires
support of our
en vue de
partners,
parvenir à
with
un
a view to
cessez-le-feu
bringing about a
ouvrant la
ceasefire,
voie
opening
à un
up
règlement
a pathway
diplomatique
to
du
a
conflit.
diplomatic
Il est impératif de
resolution of the
restaurer
conflict.
la
It is
souveraineté
important
et l'intégrité
that we
territoriale du
restore the
Liban.
sovereignty and territorial integrity
Au
of
sud Liban, le
Lebanon.
cadre est clair.
In South Lebanon, the
Il faut
situation
mettre
is
en œuvre
clear.
intégralement la résolution
There must be
1701.
full implementation
Elle est
of Resolution
reconnue tant par le
1701.
Liban
It
que
is
par
recognized by
Israël
Lebanon as
comme
well
le
as by
cadre
Israel
pour parvenir
as
à une
the framework
stabilité
to bring
durable
about
le long
lasting
de la ligne
stability
bleue
along the blue
et
line,
offrir des garanties de
and it
sécurité
offers
pour les deux
security
pays.
guarantees for both
Les
countries.
déplacés doivent pouvoir
Those that have
retourner
been
chez eux
displaced
en
must be
toute
able to return
sécurité
home in full
en
security
Israël
in
comme au
Israel
Liban.
as well as in Lebanon.
La France réaffirme son
France
engagement au sein de
reaffirms
la
its
cellule
commitment to
et elle salue
UNIFIL,
le
and
travail des
we
casques bleus.
salute the work
Avec
of the
près de
blue
500
helmets of the
700
force.
soldats,
With
la France y prend
around
toute sa part.
700 soldiers,
Il faut
France
que
is
toutes les
doing its
parties au
part.
conflit
All the
garantissent
parties
la
to the
protection
conflict
des
must
casques
guarantee
bleus.
the
C'est une
protection of the
obligation
blue
qui s'impose
helmets.
à elle.
That is an
La
obligation
France
incumbent
rappelle
upon
également la
them.
nécessité
France
d'un
also
cessez-le-feu
recalls the need for an
immédiat
immediate
et durable à Gaza,
ceasefire and
permettant
lasting
un
ceasefire
accès
in Gaza,
humanitaire complet à la
making it possible
population,
for there
la
to be
libération
complete
immédiate de tous les
humanitarian
otages
access
et
to
la
the
reprise
civilian
des
population,
négociations
the
en
immediate
vue de
release
mettre
of all
en œuvre de
hostages,
façon
and a
effective
resumption
la
of
solution à deux États.
negotiations in order to effectively
Madame la
implement the
Présidente,
two-state
les
solution.
civils doivent toujours
Madam
et
President,
partout
civilians must always
être
and everywhere
protégés.
be protected.
La France rappelle
France would
l'impératif de
recall
respect du
the
droit international
imperative of
humanitaire.
respect for international
Il est temps
humanitarian
que le
law.
Conseil de
It is
sécurité
high time
fasse
for the
preuve
Security
d'unité
Council to show
et puisse d'une
unity
seule voix
and to speak with one
demander
voice
de travailler à la désescalade dans la région.
demanding
La
that we
France
work
poursuit
towards
ses
de-escalation
efforts en
in the
ce
region.
sens, en lien
France is
avec ses
pursuing its
partenaires.
efforts
Je vous
in this
remercie.
regard with our partners. I
Je
thank you.
remercie le représentant de la
Thank you,
France
Representative of France,
et je
for their
donne maintenant
statement.
la
I
parole
now
à la
give the floor to
représentante
the
du Royaume-Uni.
representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And let me start by thanking the Secretary-General for his briefing and reiterate our full and unequivocal support to him and to the UN as they seek to address this crisis. The events this week are gravely concerning. Yesterday, the Iranian regime launched over 200 ballistic missiles at Israel. We categorically condemn this act of aggression, which escalates an already dangerous situation. As my Prime Minister said yesterday, Israel has our full support in exercising its right to defend itself against Iranian aggression. President, we are deeply concerned about the prospect of further escalation in Lebanon and across the region. We have been clear. All our efforts now must be on stopping this cycle of violence. Iran and its allies across the region must exercise restraint and step away from the brink. We've been clear. My Foreign Secretary has consistently called for a ceasefire in Lebanon by Lebanese Hezbollah and Israel, and the implementation of a political plan in line with UNSCR 1701. We have been clear. In Gaza, we need an immediate ceasefire and the release of the hostages. My Foreign Secretary has urged both Israel and Hamas to agree the ceasefire deal on the table, to choose peace and bring this chaos to an end. Peace, not war, is the courageous option. It is also the best option to secure stability and security for Israelis, Palestinians, Lebanese, and the wider region. President, my Prime Minister has been working urgently to gather support for a political solution to this crisis. Only a ceasefire in Lebanon and Gaza would create the space to agree a political plan consistent with UNSCR 1701 that allows for the sustainable return of displaced Israeli and Lebanese civilians to their homes. Innocent civilians in Israel and in Lebanon have been displaced from their homes for too long already. The only way they will return is through a sustainable peace across the blue line. The conflict in Lebanon is causing devastating consequences for civilians, especially for women and children, and draws us closer to a wider regional conflict. President, we cannot let Lebanon become another Gaza. With mounting civilian casualties and hundreds of thousands of displaced people, all parties must do everything possible to protect civilians and fully respect international humanitarian law. A widening of the conflict is in no one's interest. The actions taken now will impact a generation. I call on all actors to step back from the brink and find a political resolution. I thank you.
Je remercie la représentante du
I thank the
Royaume-Uni et je passe
representative
maintenant
of the
la
United
parole à la
Kingdom. I now
représentante
give
de
the floor
Malte.
to the representative
Thank
of
you,
Malta.
President. And at the outset, allow me to congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the Council and thank Slovenia for its leadership in steering our work in September. I also thank the Secretary-General for his remarks. I reiterate our continued and unwavering support to him and thank him for his continued leadership and moral compass whilst guiding this organization through such difficult times. Malta echoes the Secretary-General in condemning the continued and escalatory hostilities across the Middle East. This vicious cycle of violence, inevitably leading to a regional conflict, is extremely concerning. It must be brought to an end. Repeated strikes across Lebanon and Israel, and Israeli operation across the Blue Line, continued rocket fire into Israel by Hezbollah, and the latest Iranian missile attacks on Israel, together with continued rhetoric and threats by relevant parties to continue escalating hostilities, are only paving the way towards a bleak and desolate future for the entire region. Amid the worst displacement crisis in the country's history, we are witnessing yet another man-made humanitarian catastrophe. We cannot be silent in light of this deterioration. Furthermore, we strongly condemn yesterday's missile attack on Iran by Israel. We call on Tehran to immediately halt such actions, which only contribute towards expanding a complex web of tensions and push the entire region closer to the precipice. We also condemn the terror attack in Jaffa yesterday, which killed 6 Israeli civilians and wounded 9 others. President, the Israeli-Hamas war, the resulting humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and situations elsewhere in the West Bank and East Jerusalem are the core of the explosive situation we now find ourselves in. These are the devastating consequences of unchecked conflicts. This human suffering is the high price that the people across the Middle East are paying on a daily basis. We stress that indiscriminate bombings, destruction of civilian infrastructure, and mass displacements are violations of international law. All parties must abide by their obligations under international humanitarian law and prioritize the protection of civilians. Furthermore, we emphasize once again that Security Council resolutions are legally binding. They must be respected and implemented. Along the Blue Line, it is only through the full implementation of Resolution 1701 that the displaced residents of Israel and Lebanon can be able to return to their homes in peace and security. Furthermore, Lebanon must be free of weapons held by militant groups outside the authority of the Lebanese state. We stress the need to establish an area free of armed weapons, other than those of the government of Lebanon and of UNIFIL, between the Blue Line and the Litani River. Violations of Lebanon's territorial integrity and sovereignty, including through Israeli airstrikes and overflights across Lebanon, must cease. A dramatic escalation in Lebanon will only move us further from this goal. In the current crisis, UNIFIL also assumes a fundamental stabilization role. The safety and security of UN peacekeepers is paramount. Also, as a troop-contributing country, we call on all parties to protect and support the important mission of UNIFIL. In Gaza, we reiterate our call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire, the safe return of hostages to Israel, and the full implementation of relevant Security Council resolutions. We continue to support all diplomatic initiatives aimed at de-escalation across the region, including the efforts of the members of this Council. In conclusion, President, the region is witnessing a descent into all-out war, despite months of warning. The narrative for war must end, and the narrative for peace must begin. More importantly, this Council must act in a united and decisive manner. Now is the time to speak with one voice and unequivocally call for an end to all hostilities. The people of the Middle East are waiting for us. The world is waiting for us. Thank you.
Je remercie la représentante de Malte et j'invite maintenant la représentante des États-Unis à prendre la parole.
Thank you, Madam President. We look forward to working closely with you during your presidency of the Council this month. I also want to thank Slovenia for your successful conclusion of your presidency during the month of September. I wish to thank Secretary General Guterres for his briefing today. Colleagues, yesterday, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, launched nearly 200 ballistic missiles at Israel. Tragically, there has been a confirmed death of a Palestinian civilian in the West Bank. Iran's stated intention was to avenge the deaths of 2 IRGC-supported terrorist leaders and an IRGC commander by inflicting significant damage and death in Israel. Thankfully, and through close coordination between the United States and Israel, Iran failed to achieve its objectives. This outcome does not diminish the fact that this attack, intended to cause significant death and destruction, marked a significant escalation by Iran. It does not negate the need for immediate Council action. This is a moment for this Council to speak out with one voice and condemn Iran for its unprovoked attack against another member state, and equally important, to impose serious consequences on the IRGC for its actions. Colleagues, in a broad sense, Iran was complicit in the October 7th attacks on Israel through its funding, training, capabilities, and support for the military wing of Hamas. And after Hamas's horrific attack carried out nearly a year ago today, the United States sent a clear message to Iran. Don't exploit the situation in ways that would risk propelling the region into a broader war. The IRGC flagrantly and repeatedly ignored this warning by encouraging and enabling the Houthis in Yemen to disrupt global shipping and launch attacks against Israel, by supporting militant groups in Syria and Iraq, which repeatedly attacked American forces engaged in the fight against ISIS, and by arming and encouraging Hezbollah after its former leader, Nasrallah, made the decision on October 7th to open a northern front against Israel. There can be no doubt Iranian support to regional proxies has directly contributed to the crisis in Gaza and Lebanon. At the center of Iran's efforts since October 7th to sow chaos and threaten regional stability is the IRGC, which has repeatedly flouted and violated this Council's resolutions. I can't believe I have to say this, but I will, because the IRGC and its allies are out there peddling propaganda. The decision to launch nearly 200 ballistic missiles at Israel was not in any way defensive. The IRGC was not protecting Iran from threats from another member state. Instead, the IRGC was acting in solidarity with Hezbollah after the killing of Nasrallah, who led a terrorist group that has the blood of thousands of Americans, Lebanese, and Israelis on its hands. I can think of no starker example of state support of terrorism than launching ballistic missiles to avenge the death of a terrorist leader. It is indefensible and it is unacceptable. And we have a collective responsibility as members of the Security Council to impose additional sanctions on the IRGC for supporting terrorism and for flaunting so many of this Council's resolutions. If this Council sits on its hands, what message will that send? I fear that silence and inaction will only invite the IRGC to repeat attacks like what we saw yesterday and on April 13th of this year, again and again and again. Colleagues, we meet at a moment when there is a heightened risk of countries in the region being dragged into a broader conflict. This includes Lebanon. The intensified fighting over the last week has displaced nearly 1 million people, and we mourn the many civilians who've been killed. We also recognize that for nearly a year, Israel has repeatedly called for the full implementation of Resolution 1701, even as Hezbollah's attacks along the Israeli-Lebanese border have displaced Lebanese people. And even as Hezbollah has blocked Lebanon's government from exercising full sovereignty on its side of the blue line. It is significant that even in the aftermath of recent events, Israel is still calling for the full implementation of Resolution 1701. Achieving this outcome through the hard work of diplomacy remains the United States' urgent priority. We strongly believe that a diplomatic solution along the blue line, consistent with Resolution 1701, offers the only path to durably de-escalate tensions and allow Israeli and Lebanese citizens to return to their homes with safety and security. As we pursue this diplomatic solution, we reiterate our call on all parties to protect civilians. We also underscore our support for UNIFIL and emphasize that all parties must ensure UNIFIL personnel remain secure. Colleagues, we are also committed to doing everything possible to end the war in Gaza, where Palestinian civilians have been caught in the crosshairs of war, where dire humanitarian crisis persists. That's why we're working to bring about a ceasefire deal with release of hostages, consistent with Resolution 2735. The events of the past week should send an unambiguous message to Hamas's leadership, which continues to cower in tunnels beneath Gaza. Hezbollah and Iran will not rescue you. The only path forward is a ceasefire agreement. We must double down on diplomatic solutions that would ensure the safety of people across the region. As we do, there should be no doubt. The United States will continue to support Israel's right to defend itself against Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and any other Iranian-supported terrorists. Of course, how Israel defends itself matters. We continue to make clear that measures must be taken to minimize civilian harm. Colleagues, as President Biden emphasized following yesterday's attack, the United States is fully supportive of Israel. Our actions have been defensive in nature. Let me be clear. The Iranian regime will be held responsible for its actions, and we strongly warn against Iran or its proxies taking actions against the United States or further actions against Israel. Colleagues, this moment of great risk is a test of this Council. It is imperative that we unequivocally condemn Iran's attack and demand that it cease its support for terrorism in the region. People in Israel, in Gaza, and the West Bank, in Lebanon, and across the region deserve a durable peace, and it is far past time for this Council to hold Iran accountable for fanning the flames of war. Thank you, Madam President.
Je remercie la représentante des États-Unis
I thank the
et je donne
representative
la
of the
parole maintenant
United States.
au
I now give the
représentant
floor to the representative of the
Corée.
Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to thank Slovenia for their able leadership as President of the Council during the month of September. Let me also take this opportunity to congratulate you, Madam President, for assuming the presidency for October. I express my deep gratitude to the Secretary General for his briefing today and his tireless efforts for peace in the Middle East. This is a moment of reckoning for the Security Council. Resolution 1701 has been violated by all parties on the ground. A broader regional war with the potential to devastate not just Lebanon and the region, but far beyond, is dangerously knocking on our door. Our repeated calls for urgent restraint have been ignored. Both the regional stability and the credibility of this Council are now in jeopardy. Let there be no misunderstanding. It was Hamas' brutal attacks in broad daylight that set this escalation in motion. However, neither October 7th nor the ensuing response give any actor the right to violate the international norms and institutions that the United Nations and the global community have built over decades, including international humanitarian law, Security Council resolutions, and the sovereignty and territorial integrity stipulated under the UN Charter. The Security Council which bears the primary responsibility for maintaining international peace and security, must unite and act. This is not like any other situation. This conflict has the potential to broaden and deepen, involving many countries, without clear limitations in geography, and with far-reaching implications on international politics, economics, and even humanity as a whole. This demands more than passive condemnation. The Security Council must do something significant now to prevent the situation from plunging deeper into the abyss. The very raison d'etre of the Security Council is at stake here. Indeed, now is the time for the Security Council to draw a firm line in the sand. No actor should be given a green light of impunity or a blank check to operate far beyond the rule of law. We cannot afford to be paralyzed by frustration or helplessness. Colleagues, let me conclude by fully echoing the statement made by the Secretary General yesterday. And I quote, "I condemn the broadening of the Middle East conflict with escalation after escalation. This must stop. We absolutely need a ceasefire," unquote. I thank you.
Je remercie le représentant de la République de Corée et j'invite la représentante de Slovénie à prendre la parole.
Thank you, Madam President. First, allow me, on behalf of Ambassador Boger and our entire team, to thank you sincerely and other members for your kind words, and also to wish to congratulate you and your team for assuming the presidency of the Council for October. Wish you all the best. We thank the Secretary General for his briefing. Madam President, in the last 2 weeks, we have met several times to discuss the situation in the Middle East. It has become increasingly clear that the current escalation is gaining its own, even more dangerous momentum. The actions and reactions of actors involved are dragging the region further away from peace and closer to an all-out war. No single party can absolve itself of blame for the chaos that is unfolding. This has become a crisis of retaliation and vengeance, where each strike fuels the next. Let me be clear, the region needs full and immediate de-escalation. For this to happen, a ceasefire on all fronts is urgent. We condemn the recent escalation in the Middle East. This includes Iranian attack on Israel. It includes Israeli attacks on Lebanon and the escalation between Hezbollah and Israel. We call on Israel to revoke the ground operation in southern Lebanon. It also includes continuous Israeli military in Gaza, and it includes yesterday's terror attack in Jaffa. We see deeply troublesome parallels. Escalation from any side only leads to further violence, not security or peace. We want to underline more violence cannot bring more stability and security in the region or beyond. War is not a solution to the problems in the Middle East. There is no military solution to the crisis. We call on all countries and actors to show restraint, and to everyone with influence must exert it. To Israel, Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis and others, the circle of violence must stop. Retaliations must stop. Escalations must stop. We call on all parties to respect international law, particularly international humanitarian human rights law. Respect for and compliance with international law are a must. Protection of civilians must be ensured at all times, and we are dismayed by the impact of the escalation in Lebanon on civilians and condemn the high number of civilian casualties. Massive displacement in Lebanon will add an additional strain on a country which is already facing numerous challenges. Equally, this intensification of the conflict will not bring thousands of displaced Israelis back to their homes. And we must not forget about the entire population of Gaza being displaced repeatedly. There is a dire need to recommit and fully implement Resolution 1701. This Council must stand united in its call for de-escalation and ceasefire. We repeat our call for safety and security of UNIFIL to be ensured at all times. We also take this opportunity to express our full support to the work of the United Nations and the Secretary General in this crisis. We appeal to Israel to reconsider today's announcement. It is high time to strengthen the role of diplomacy and to prioritize peace. We support all initiatives which could bring stability about peace. Ceasefire negotiations related to Lebanon and to Gaza are utmost needed. We underline this Council has primary responsibility for maintenance of international peace and security. The region is standing at a precipice. We are a step away from an all-out war that threatens not only the region, but global peace and stability. In the complex history of the Middle East, the Council has made various attempts to shoulder its responsibility. It is now on us, these 15 countries sitting by this table, to unite and call out for an all-out ceasefire. I thank you, Madam President.
Je remercie la représentante de Slovénie et j'invite le représentant d'Algérie à prendre la parole.
Representative of Algeria to take the floor.
Madam President, I would like to commend Slovenia for their remarkable presidency of the Council during last month. And I also congratulate Switzerland for assuming the presidency for this month and assure them of Algeria's full support. I extend my sincere gratitude to Mr. Antonio Guterres for his comprehensive briefing. And I express Algeria's full solidarity, admiration, and support for the Secretary General following the incredible decision of the Israeli occupying authorities to declare him persona non grata. This decision reflects a clear disdain of the UN system and the entire international community. For the Israeli authorities, no narrative, no truth exists except their own. Madam President, this meeting marks the third time in a single week that we have heard from the Secretary General regarding the Middle East. It is a testimony of the gravity of the situation. We stand perilously close to a regional conflagration, with tensions escalating daily. The situation has further deteriorated due to the Israeli aggression against Lebanon, beginning with the targeting of civilian electronic devices and progressing to indiscriminate bombardment and ground invasion that shows a blatant disregard for human life, a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law. Following the attacks detonating civilian electronic devices, the Security Council convened at Algeria's request. We endeavored to have the Council send a clear, a simple message, a call for immediate de-escalation, a call for immediate de-escalation. Regrettably, the Council failed in this attempt. Madam President, the Security Council's inability to act has exacted a devastating bill, a devastating toll. Between September 17 and 25th, the Israeli militaries claimed more than 1,000 lives in Lebanon. 1,000 lives in Lebanon, including 87 children and 156 women, while displacing 1 million of Lebanese in the country's largest exodus. Our inaction has effectively granted Israel under the right of self-defense principle. Our inaction has effectively granted Israel carte blanche to continue its rampage in Gaza, in West Bank, carte blanche to escalate against Lebanon and pursue the bloody agenda of death and destruction. Now we hear the new rhetorics of de-escalation through escalation. Strange. This is a dangerous fallacy. Escalation inevitably breeds further escalation for years to come. This surge in violence has derailed efforts to implement Resolution 2735 and has severely compromised any prospect for calm in Lebanon and the wider region. The Security Council must act with greater resolve to be relevant, simply to be credible. As the highest authority responsible for maintaining international peace and security, it is unacceptable for its decision, including Resolution 2735, to be blatantly disregarded. Israel is not above the law, and we must hold it accountable. We need solutions, tangible, enforceable solutions. No more rhetorics that serves no one. Madam President, while we must not allow the escalation in Lebanon to overshadow the ongoing tragedy in Gaza, it seems some have grown indifferent of Gaza's people plight. Any effort to address the broader escalation in the region must begin with halting the brutal assault in Gaza. I repeat, any effort to address the broader escalation in the region must begin with halting the brutal assault in Gaza. We need an immediate ceasefire. We need an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Everyone, save for the Israeli occupier, seeks this end, this cycle of violence, and is working toward that end. So how long will the international community remain impotent in the face of Israel's defiance? How long will we fail to enforce full implementation of Resolution 1701, especially Israel's withdrawal from Lebanese territory, a key condition for Lebanon's stability. Madam President, the Middle East urgently requires concerted actions from all of us, to find lasting, sustainable solution to its crisis. These solutions demand an end to Israeli occupation of Arab lands in Lebanon, in Syria, and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state with Al-Quds Sharif as its capital. I thank you, Madam President.
Je remercie le représentant d'Algérie
I thank
et
the
je passe la
representative
parole
of
au
Algeria.
représentant du
I now give
Mozambique.
the floor to the representative of Mozambique.
Madam President, allow me first to congratulate Switzerland on assuming the presidency of the Security Council in this very challenging month of October. We pledge our full support. We also thank Slovenia for its successful presidency in the month of September. We are grateful to His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, for his insights on this deeply concerning matter. Madam President, the Middle East remains a region of intense and complex geopolitical dynamics, shaped by historical legacies, power struggles, and intricate relationship among various states and non-state actors, significantly shaping the region's landscape. The Palestine question, a central and profoundly impactful issue, continues to influence diplomatic relations and strategic interests, not only within the region, but also globally. The ongoing conflict and the quest for a two-state solution continue to be pivotal in discussion about peace and stability in the Middle East. Amidst the ongoing Israel strikes in Gaza, Beirut, and beyond, Iran has recently launched ballistic missiles into Israel, marking a sharp escalation in regional tensions. This action is reportedly in retaliation for the recent killing of Hezbollah and Hamas leaders by Israel airstrikes.